So I want to quibble with that characterization. I think that I understand where you're coming from, and I don't think it's unreasonable to say, well, the firms are very large because they have a lot of data, and that gives them a competitive advantage, and so we need to create alternatives. But I actually don't think that is well supported by the evidence. So the firms claim that the reason that they have grown so big is because they have these big data advantages and that they have these longitudinal data sets that they've accumulated sort of non-consensually from us, thanks to the vacuum of privacy law over the years. And that plus things like network effects and other sort of esoteric ideas from economics have produced a kind of unassailable advantage that they now have, such that all we can hope for is to try and build out a kind of peripheral parallel ecosystem.
I don't think their advantage is unassailable. So that's certainly not what I
so
was
okay,
saying,
but fair enough.
But
I want to quibble with just the idea that the advantage accrues from data. So first of all, the mechanism by which that advantage accumulates is not well articulated by its advocates. I understand how knowing that I'm married to someone who's pregnant, say, would give an enormous advantage to a firm that wanted to sell prenatal care and prenatal merchandise, or to market the ability to reach people who are expecting a child. I even understand how you could do some life cycle marketing and you could say, well, in 5 years, maybe we can hit these people up for pre-K. But for the most part, the half-life of that data is very short. The fact that I tried to buy a pair of shoes yesterday is really only valuable up until the moment I buy that pair of shoes, right? So you can retarget some ads at me that say like, hey, I hear you're looking for some shoes. But, a week later, I've either bought the shoes or forgotten about shoes, right? That data ceases to have much value. But there is an enormous value to having the data in a commercial perspective, because when investors are contemplating investing in rivals to you, you have this story that you've put out into the world as a data accumulator that they will forever be at a disadvantage. That because they won't have 25-year longitudinal data sets that start when, Google was 2 servers and Lego enclosures under a desk at Stanford, they will never be able to compete with this. And really, given the half-life of the data, it's not hugely valuable. And then as against that, I think we need to think about how much concentration there's been in sectors that aren't data driven. So professional wrestling used to have 25 leagues and now it has 1. And the guy who owns it's this like rapey Trump donor billionaire just had to step down amid a cloud of sexual scandal, who bought all of his competitors. Right? He just went out and he bought all the competitors. Now, 40 years ago, we changed antitrust law to make it legal to buy competitors. Facebook talks a big game about how it has a network advantage. But, what Facebook has done historically, right up until the latest moment, is whenever someone was a contender with it, it did one of 2 things. It bought them or it crushed them. So Instagram comes along, Mark Zuckerberg sends an email to his CFO in the middle of the night, which I'm sure he regretted later, that said, it is better to buy than to compete. We should buy Instagram. Later on, after a gap in which we mostly presume that his lawyer called him up and said, Jesus Christ, Mark, what are you putting in writing, you absolute nut job? He sent another email that said, just to be clear here, I wasn't saying that we should buy them because we didn't want to compete with them. We could totally compete with them, and that's not why we're buying them. Clearly, that's why you bought them. You have emails from Google executives saying we're going to crush Yelp, not because even though they have better results than ours, we're going to put our results first and no one will see them. Now, that's not a data advantage. That's because we don't enforce antitrust law.
Well, but it's not either or, right? I mean, if you look if you take the example of Amazon, for instance,
sure.
I mean, one of my mother's friends is constantly shopping on Amazon. And she buys a lot of crap on Amazon, and it's constantly making recommendations like buy this, buy that. She's buying the same sort of toys and RV paraphernalia and stuff over and over again. It's certainly really clear that in that case, putting product recommendations in her face is inducing her to waste money on those.
Yeah, but Amazon is very good at that, and they know just about when you're ready to buy it again anyway, and they remind you.
But that's a bit of a parlor trick. That's a bit of a parlor
it's a
trick.
parlor trick,
it's
but I'm
like
just
the
saying
parlor
it
trick that
works.
Target plays, where they see you buying folic acid, and because to a first approximation, the only people who buy folic acid are pregnant, they then start to bombard you with a bunch of stuff. And people act like they
Well,
are
this is stuff I've
sorcerers for
already
having
bought,
figured out
so
this
they
very
know that I
simple
buy it.
Well,
correlation.
I would say,
But the point I want to make, just one more thing, is that Amazon is also the only place that people buy diapers online. And that's not because they have a recommendation engine. It's because they spent $200 million selling diapers at a loss for 6 months until diapers.com went bankrupt. And then they bought them out of bankruptcy. And anyone who thinks about going into the diaper business now knows that if they do, Amazon will undercut them, right? Sell at a loss until they go out of business and buy them too, right? VCs call that the kill zone. So, like, let's just apply Occam's razor. We have seen consolidation in beer, finance, shipping, cheerleading uniforms, horse shows, professional wrestlings, spirit, tobacco, vaping, and you know, every other sector of the industry. So, where is the data-driven advantage that drove all lenses and glasses frames and glasses retail and glasses insurance into one company called Luxottica Essilor? And when you look at the actual story of how Luxottica Essilor did it, they just bought all the competitors. They bought every retailer for glasses. They went to Coach and they said, we want to buy you. And Coach said, well, we don't want to sell. And they said, great. You're no longer for sale in Sunglass Hut. You're no longer for sale at Lens Crafters. We'll be back in a year when you're broke, which is exactly what they did. And they bought them. So you see exactly the same conduct across every sector, including in tech. And so if you're going to say, you've got kind of a controlled experiment, here's a sector where no one claims there's a significant data advantage, and here's a sector where they claim there is a significant data advantage. Is the growth and performance of the sector significantly different? If it's not, then you can say, well, maybe that data advantage is not very significant. If the sector where no one claims a data advantage has had the same consolidation, let's address this first using the traditional tools of antitrust, where we have a very clear causal link. We told you that you were allowed to buy your competitors. You bought your competitors. Now you don't have competitors anymore. That's a story that's requires that we accept far fewer facts not in evidence than the story that says, well, you bought some competitors, but also think about your data advantage.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the fact that concentration occurs across many different market sectors is inarguably true. And I mean, this represents just the consequences of some basic game theory at play here, right? I mean, which would be results you've seen as well. I mean, many iterated betting games among multiple parties have the property that when one party gets just a little bit wealthier than the others, it can then outcompete them over and over again in iterated bets, so they become insanely wealthy. And we're seeing phenomena similar to that. Now, however, I still think the data advantage is quite real. It might well be that while it could be real, but yet not especially material to their financial success, because they have an even easier trick to maintain domination.
That may be so true.
I have a question though, you guys.
Right?
Sure, go ahead.
How did we get from reputation systems to data advantage? I understand the game theory is probably part of the reputation system, but there was some kind of natural progression there that you both understood that I didn't understand.
Yeah, because, well, if my feeling is that if you had the right decentralized network with a well-tuned reputation system in it, you could compete with big tech in these sectors. And I think one consequence of what Cory is saying is, unless the entity with this decentralized reputation system can't be bought, then it will just be eaten by one of these big companies. So it doesn't matter.